My name is Carson and I'll be your host for today. I'd like to introduce everybody for a moment. We have Harbhajan, Manya, Suhani, Arnav, me, Mcr, Chris, Shambhavi, and Arnav. And today we're going to be diving into an insightful discussion on the importance of media content review, how it's shaped our understanding of media discourse, and throughout our coursework, what we've explored and the various media content analysis we've seen, the film studies, the advertising, and of course the media and performance discourses. This roundtable is an opportunity to reflect on these things, discuss key frameworks, and connect them to real-world media examples. But before we begin, I'd love for every one of you to share your personal experience with the course. Highlight one concept or theory that stood out to you. Let's start with Arnav.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me here. This course has really opened my eyes to a lot of things, especially the depth of media narratives which goes beyond the surface level entertainment. One of the most impactful aspects for me was understanding the various discussions and perspectives in media performance discourse, which pushed us to question how media reflects the world around us.
And I feel like that's a great point, right? Many of us have become more reflective about our media consumption through this course. Arvi, how about you? What concept resonated with you the most?
Both professionally and academically, this course really deepened my understanding of critical media thinking. More importantly, it taught me how to dissect media messages rather than passive absorbing them. One key takeaway for me was how the media influences public perception and social standards. It's something we often overlook.
And of course, we discussed about this a lot, right? How media constructs reality, right? How sometimes I feel like I think Mcr can talk about this more effectively.
Something that stood out to me was cultivation theory. The idea that media doesn't just entertain but gradually shapes our worldview. It made me think how much of my perspective is unconsciously influenced by what all I consume on media and social media every day. In class, we explored this theory through different case studies as well, which demonstrated how certain narratives fuel public opinion. Similarly, in film and advertising, we see aspirational portrayals shaping our understanding of success and status.
Right, and the subtle power of media framing can really shape our perceptions without us even realizing it, really. And I feel like a lot of the time that gets lost on us. The subtle power of media framing can really shape our perceptions without us realizing it. Harbhajan, what's your take on this?
Well, as Arnav said, it was an eye-opener, but
Right.
not just for the attendance purposes. But one of the most impactful activities for me was that the advertising worksheet which we got, the fourth worksheet, which we lost.
That's
Guilty.
Nobody
But-
found it.
Yeah. In that activity, we had to analyze which ads we found appealing versus which ones we wouldn't consider at all around the campus. Going around places like Rangoli, Canteen, and even any posters we found. It was interesting to see that even as media students, we weren't always able to differentiate between persuasive tactics and genuine choices.
Right.
It made me question just how much influence advertising has on our purchasing and buying decisions.
Right. And advertising subtle persuasion techniques, like you mentioned, often work on us without us even realizing, right? And Chris, you had a similar realization, I believe, right?
Absolutely. For me, this course served as a self-check on how I engage with media. Like, I would just consume content without much thought, before very passively. But now I find myself critically analyzing the narratives behind these messages. And a concept that was an eye-opener for me was how certain themes in social media were normalized. For example, violence. We often become desensitized to violence in entertainment, like video games or films, without realizing it. And younger generations are exposed to this at a much younger age.
Right.
This made me reflect on the ethical responsibility of media creators.
And I feel like media's influence extends beyond just entertainment and into societal conditioning. Samani, did anything particularly stand out to you in that?
Yes, I feel like framing theory completely changed the way I interpret media. It's not just what's shown, but it's how it's shown. We analyzed case studies like Kunal Kamra's coverage, where different news outlets framed him in a completely opposing way. This theory gave me the language to question the hidden structure behind media narrative.
And I think the way information is presented alters public perception, often without people even realizing that. Shambhavi, anything you'd like to add?
Well, personally for me, one of the key theories that stood out to me was the social responsibility theory, which basically argues that media at the end of the day should be free and independent, but at the same time also serve to the public interest. It encourages responsible journalism, diverse perspectives, and that, or at the same time, avoid content that might mislead audiences.
And especially considering like the current media climate, right? That I feel like that's a very, very important point to look at. Manya, what's your perspective?
Well, something that resonated with me a lot was structuralism and semiotics. The idea that media meaning is constructed through underlying symbols, signs, and narratives help me see that meaning isn't just in the text itself, it's shaped by cultural context. For instance, let's consider political campaigns. The words used, the imagery, and even the colors, they're all selected to trigger specific subconscious associations in the audience. It's fascinating to decode these layers of meaning.
And that's a powerful analytical tool, right? Understanding symbolism helps us see beyond that surface level content, right? And it helps us realize like the deeper meaning behind things. In any case, let's shift gears. Let's dive into something, our topic of discussion. So let's start off with a broad question. What do you think is the fundamental reason we critique media?
Well, I think media is central to how we understand the world. It not only informs, but persuades and even manipulates public opinion. Without a critical lens, we risk being passive consumers rather than active participants in media culture.
Absolutely. Take the film Code for example. It is such a powerful example of how cinema can quietly but sharply expose the deep inequalities that still exist in Indian society, especially in institutions such as our legal system. On surface, it tells the story of an aging folk singer who is arrested and put on trial for allegedly inciting a sewage worker's suicide through one of his songs. But if you look closer, the film isn't really about the trial itself. It's about something more. It's about everything around it. The slow bureaucratic process, the judges who carry personal biases, the lawyers whose lives reflect different realities, and how caste and class silently influence everything even today.
Also, it does not need dramatic music or big courtroom scenes. Instead, it uses silence, long pauses, and everyday details to show how the system treats people differently based on how they look, where they come from, or how much money or power they have. The movie also contrasts his life with that of the defense lawyers, who comes from an upper class background and lives a very comfortable life. This contrast quietly points to the invisible privileges that shape a society. Don't you think so?
Yeah. And when we engage with it through a deeper perspective, especially with the help of media critique and theory, we realize that it's actually showing us how power, privilege, and prejudice operate in everyday life, including in institutions that are supposed to be free and equal. This is why critique becomes so important. It helps us notice layers, how media represents caste, how it reflects inequality, and how stories can be told in ways that either question the status quo or quietly reinforce it.
Well, in that way, we can put it not just as a film, but also as a mirror. And as media students, it teaches us that quality content isn't always just flashy. I think everybody agrees with that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the quietest stories say the loudest stories. If you're willing to look beyond the surface and not just stay on the base layer.
And to add on to that, right? I feel this needs to be discussed that quality in media has always been a topic of debate. And it's not hard to see why. Some people think media's main job is to inform the public, spread awareness, hold power accountable, serve democracy. Others believe media exists to entertain, keep people engaged, and respond to what the audience wants, especially in today's world. Fast-paced content, stuff digital. This tension between what media should do and what media is actually doing is something, I believe his name is Dennis McQuail, explains very well in his theories. He says media can serve both normative and commercial functions. That means it can aim to be socially responsible and ethical, normative. Or it can focus on making money or gaining viewers and becoming popular, and that's the commercial side of it. Is that right?
Yeah.
When we apply ethical and ideological perspectives to media, whether it's news, ads, advertising, or social media, we begin to see not just what's being said, but how and why it's being said. For example, when we critiqued TV nuisance and saw how Indian news anchors perform more like entertainers than journalists, we understand how far the media has drifted from McQuaid's ideal of normative responsibility. Throughout critique, we learn to go beyond the surface and challenge bias and assess quality not just by how engaging or popular something is, but by whether it informs, empowers, and serves the public good. That's what truly makes media meaningful.
Moreover, the rise of digital media has democratized content creation, but also intensified misinformation, polarization, and echo chambers. Thus, the role of media content is no longer confined to elite institutions. It is now a hybrid space where legacy media, influencers, algorithms, citizen journalism interact with it, often blurring the boundaries between fact and opinion, journalism and entertainment, truth and ideology.
Right. And I think you mentioned it, that to evaluate media quality, one must move beyond surface level indicators like production value or popularity. Instead, I feel understanding media quality comes down to 4 broad markers: credibility, contextuality, inclusivity, and of course, civic value.
Bringing in the framing theory I mentioned earlier, let's take Panaro Camera and India's Got Ratings controversy. As examples, sure, both the incidents show how media framing can change how we perceive events. In India's Got Rating, the focus was on shock value, not on the deeper value of the media ethics. This makes us question, what is the media even paradigm?
YouTube is the answer. But we have come to realize that media often prioritizes sensationalism over substance.
Yeah.
Framing an event dramatically grabs attention, viewers, and increases the TRP, of course, but hides more important discussions.
Yeah, it takes away from them.
Exactly, and by focusing on flashy, superficial stories, the media can, distract people from the deeper, more important topics that need attention and focus on topics which, don't deserve that.
Yeah, not
kind
much of
attention.
importance.
It has made jokes national issues and national issues jokes, literally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The focus shifts to the spectacle and not the serious questions about the role of media. Similarly, Kamra's actions were framed either as defiance or disrespect, which changed how the public saw him.
It's all about power at the end. The media shapes our understanding of events. Kamra could be seen as a hero or a villain depending on how the story is framed. This influences how we think about freedom of expression and authority.
To add on, media's framing can influence societal values, political views, and public debates. It shapes how we engage with issues like freedom of speech or media responsibility. And it's a pattern. Like already mentioned, the media often focuses on drama rather than the deeper issues, like in India's Got Rated. This leads to important topics being ignored or overlooked.
And I know we've been discussing this, right? But I don't think any of us really came up with a solution. So I'd like to ask all of you, how are we thinking that how are we going to change this? How are we going to make viewers aware of this?
I think viewers need to question the angle of each story that's being presented to them. What's being emphasized and why. Understanding framing helps us to see the bigger picture and not just what's presented before us. Being media literate and seeking different viewpoints also at the same time helps us engage critically with the news topics.
I feel like that's a good step ahead. we're surrounded with it. Let's not joke around about
live
it.
with them.
Right? Basically, yeah, it's everywhere. They're on the streets, and on our phones, especially on our phones, right? Every scroll, every search. What I was thinking about was, are we really choosing those, or is the algorithms feeding us that?
Well, personalization sounds convenient, but where's the line between relevance and surveillance? Right? Because when brands know too much about us, it stops being helpful, it starts being creepy. Just imagine a situation, middle of the night, you're scrolling through Amazon looking for a product, and then you take some time off, you go to Instagram and scroll, you see, oh my god, it's still there. Like, why is it in my feed now?
Yeah.
And it's just not about privacy now, it's about power. Ads now sell more than products, they sell lifestyle, values, and even identities. People now want to be someone else and achieve what they have achieved and not look on like what they have right now. So
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, and who controls that narrative? Most ads show idealized, filtered truths. Media critique helps us ask what's real and what's manufactured.
And to add on that, as Amit Doshi said it best, authenticity builds loyalty. But what happens when authenticity is just another marketing tactic?
Consumers want honesty, not gimmicks. That's why media literacy matters the most. And we need to see past the polish. And let's not forget celebrity influence. Their reach is huge, but does it help or harm? Sometimes it turns thinking consumers into passive followers.
That is a very concerning problem today. Many people are influenced to take up anything that the celebrity promotes. Also, let me bring up algorithms here. Algorithms predict behavior, but they don't understand culture. Ads lose emotional depth when data replaces storytelling. So media critique isn't optional, it's essential. So media, it keeps us aware, protects our agency, and calls out manipulation when we see it.
Right. And like to preface you to your points, right? You said that people want to be someone else, right? And you said people look to their celebrities. I feel like that connects themselves, right? Because they see these people above them and they want to be that, right? They want to be big, they want to be popular, they want to be rich, right? And so if a celebrity advertises something, they think if I can take this, if I can have that, that means I'm in that league. And that's where I wanted to bring up the next point. Where do we draw the line? How do we decide which perspectives in media are the most, media critique are the most valid?
I think it depends on the approach. Some critique media through a political economy lens, examining who owns the media and proves who interests it serves. Others take a cultural approach, focusing on representation and audience reception. Each method reveals different aspects of media influence.
Well, I just got a deja vu of all the discussions we used to have in class right now.
Right.
But to add on to a point, combining these perspectives can be even more powerful. For instance, our readings discuss how commercialization affects the news objectivity. But what we fail to notice is that if we analyze media solely through representation, we might miss the economic forces itself that shape the content.
Exactly. And I feel media critique isn't just about identifying biases, it's understanding them, it's understanding the forces behind them. And I feel like now that's very important when influence is everywhere. Before we wrap up, let's go around, right? Share one key reason why media critique matters.
Well, one big reason for me is that media often reflects social and cultural values, which we critique and learn what a society believes or prioritizes at a certain level of time.
Yeah. And even researchers like historians and sociologists, even they use media content as evidence for those values, especially to understand a specific group or even communities at times, to get a better understanding of their beliefs.
It's also important because media has real effects. Whether good or bad, intentional or not, it shapes how people think and behave. We can't fully understand its impact without looking closely at these contents.
Exactly. And to measure those effects, we also need to evaluate the quality of media. That's what's called performance analysis. Looking at whether media meets certain standards.
Yeah, and another reason critique matters is because of the biasness. A lot of media subtly or sometimes even openly favors one side of the story. Sometimes without even meaning to. Critiquing helps us understand that.
Yeah.
And we can't really study audiences without studying content. What people watch or read helps shape who they really are. So media analysis and audience analysis go hand in hand.
Also, media critique includes looking at genres, narratives, and discourse, how stories are told, how messages are framed. That's a key part of understanding what's being communicated.
Right, and in those cases, the media text itself becomes the main subject of study. In the end, it's not just about the message, but how it's messaged.
Right, right. And when we take time to break all of this down, we stop being those passive consumers. Right? And media critique gives us those tools to question, analyze, and think critically about what we watch, what we read, what we hear, and we stay informed. And it's hard to influence someone who's informed. To sum up, as ever changing as it is, the media today is arguably one of the most influential forces in our lives. Through cinema, news, the ongoing stream of debates around politics, social justice, pop culture, YouTubers, this, that.
Nationalism.
Yeah. We've come to realize that every piece of media carries intent. Whether it aims to inform, entertain, inspire, provoke. Yeah. And
Messing with media.
what
My bad.
what we've learned through this roundtable, right, is that media is not neutral. It reflects choices. The creative choices, ideological, commercial ones, all these choices, behind every one of those is a mindset, a goal being pushed, a narrative being shared, an agenda being formed. And as consumers, it's no longer enough to passively just accept what we see and what we buy. It comes down to what we must question. Why is this being shown to me? Who benefits from this message? What perspectives am I missing? And the process of critical thinking is what transforms us from passive viewers to active participants in the media landscape that we all are sucked into, we live in. Throughout this discussion, our understanding of media evolved. We've begun to see content not just as entertainment or information, but as a cultural force that can shape ideologies, reinforce biases, or even challenge that faith, challenge that everything that we believed in. That's the power media holds over people's lives. Personally, I've started paying more attention to the intent behind media production, asking myself what stories are being told behind this, right? Whose voices are being heard, who's being lifted up, who's being brought down and silenced. That being said, there are still areas I'd like to explore further, right? For instance, how can we grow stronger? How do we develop stronger media literacy? Especially like in younger generations who are super easy to influence. How can we ensure independent voices, not swayed by external forces, continue to thrive in a system that's dominated by corporate interests who are pushing and influencing them? And how will emerging technologies like AI reshape the boundaries of content creation and authenticity? Especially with like artists, writers, people who create this media. To conclude, media is central to shaping our understanding of the world. And without a critical lens, we risk becoming passive consumers instead of active contributors to the culture we inhabit. I think it's very important in this day and age to keep asking questions, keep learning, and most importantly, watch. But watch with awareness.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank all of you for coming today. Everybody contributed a lot to this, and thank you, everyone who tuned in. I'd like you all to have a great day.
And do subscribe to Group 2 Ab. Thank you.